Jill is keeping an eye on it. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Rhoda Moise, or Moise? Moise, okay. And she is at the University of Miami Health System and the Center for Translational Sleep and Circadian Sciences. And her topic will be Photovoice for leveraging integrative medicine amongst Black adults to overcome insufficient sleep. So take it away.
Peace, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction. We'll get right into it for the sake of time with an overview of the presentation today. And so just to give some context, I trained for my undergrad at Penn State University, earned my doctorate at the University of Miami, went on to complete a T32 postdoctoral fellowship at Temple University, and have been recruited back to the University of Miami as faculty in the Department of Psychiatry. And so I added this slide, I took it out and then re-added it based off of the discussion that took place on the panel this morning to identify those 3 areas of your research and to really see how they can intersect and allow that to drive how you pursue opportunities. So in this beautiful room of scholars, if we have overlapping interests, please let's connect. I'm really fascinated and passionate about community-based participatory research looking through the lens of chronic disease prevention and control, and then further getting into immigrant and minority health, understanding how can we really develop and support systems that have healthy lifestyles and access to it, with focus on minoritized communities here in the US as well as the global South. And then further, really fascinated in how we can advance with integrative medicine using both technology and understanding socio-cultural factors. And so I'd like to highlight actually one of my first author publications during graduate school that looked at the use of cultural identity in predicting lifestyle behaviors in Latinx immigrant adolescents. And what was fascinating here is that sleep was one of the factors that came up as significant. So when a Latinx immigrant was able to merge and sort of acculturate in a way both their ethnic identity with their US identity, they reported better sleep. And so that early on planted the seed of understanding how culture may influence health and shape health lifestyle behaviors. So on to the current study. I am currently working on a diversity supplement to a parent grant called Essentials. And that really looks at the determinants of insufficient sleep among Blacks and the effects of disparities in health outcomes. And so we know that there's racial ethnic disparities with insufficient sleep defined as getting less than 7 hours of sleep. And so that was me this morning on an early morning flight. But understanding that consistent insufficient sleep really is a major health risk for cardiovascular disease and its related markers, and overlaps with other chronic conditions like diabetes and Alzheimer's. And so there's even a deeper biological understanding of what may be going on here, and that's what the parent study seeks to capture, to be able to ultimately inform personalized behavioral interventions that really aim at reducing adverse effects of insufficient sleep in Blacks who the literature shows experience a 3-fold greater increase of the risk relative to their white counterparts. So significance, I love the conversation that was taking place earlier, that understanding that Black is not a monolithic category. Some of this research has been developed in Latin and Hispanic communities, even at the CDC level when we're looking at pregnancy and understanding the differences in populations such as Mexican populations, Puerto Rican populations, etc. And so when you aggregate them all together, then you do dilute understanding what may be going on. So there's exponential growth in this large racial classification of Black, which is being driven by immigration from the Caribbean and Africa. And this is also being driven by increased birth rates once here in the United States. And so we know that chronic disease presents differently by race, ethnicity, sex, and age. So all these intersections are really important to understand how do we approach health equity. So I'm fascinated by this nuanced biopsychosocial essence of what may be going on here. And so really approaching health disparities and chronic disease prevention, I employ community-based participatory research methods using both statistics and qualitative research to be able to understand what may be going on from cells, that basic biology, to communities, to behaviors and beliefs, and potential systematic barriers. So, as a part of my small research project, I really will be honing in on a specific element of my diversity supplement that is supported in more detail. So these are the overall aims and hypotheses. One is a biological aim, understanding what may be going on in terms of epigenetics when exposed to chronic insufficient sleep. The second aim relates to psychosocial factors of understanding how stress may be influencing chronic disease through activation of the immune system. And stress can be looked at including overall perceived stress as well as stress from racism. And then third, again, the focus of my small research project is to really understand from a qualitative stance, how can we start to use integrative medicine to be able to leverage alternative and complementary medicine approaches to promoting health and wellness. So this is a visual of the aims, just to put it in another format. And again, the third aim is really where I'm honing in. And you see at the bottom of this visual, initially I proposed focus groups, but with the small research project, I'll be using Photovoice. Just by a show of hands, who's familiar with Photovoice? Okay, I'd love to see it. So the innovation of my project, again, just focusing on that third part, instead of just doing qualitative focus groups, we'll be doing Photovoice, which I'll talk a little bit more about, to really be able to start to develop evidence-based models in the field of integrative medicine for health promotion. So this is somewhat of a throwback to some of my dissertation research, and what I love about Photovoice is that it brings soul to science in a way. So it's said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And as you see, there's some images behind me that are a product of the Photovoice process. And I was able to highlight this work and share it, disseminate it beyond just the scientific community in presentations and publications, which are important, but also through a library exhibit at the University of Miami to be able to engage students, particularly medical students, and the like, in understanding what the implications of this research is, or what they are. And so, again, to talk about this third part, where the aim is to generate insight into factors that drive healthy sleep versus insufficient sleep, again, less than 7 hours, from an integrative medicine lens. And when I say integrative medicine, I'm really conceptualizing as complementary and alternative medicine, including spirituality, herbalism, meditation, mindfulness, etc. And with that, the question is important. And so you'll see at the bottom, the question is being finalized as the prompt to please take photographs which show your current natural practices that result in you feeling soothed for better sleep. And so, since this is currently under IRB review, just for some more details about the methodology, I'm referencing my dissertation work. And so I use the Penn 3 cultural model, which really posits ethnic identity as an asset-based lens to see how we can promote health from that type of cultural perspective. And so, for instance, this study, which again, was part of my dissertation research and is available through peer-reviewed literature, looks at cancer prevention in the Central Plateau of Haiti. And the question here was for women to capture images that demonstrated their barriers to accessing care for cervical cancer screening. And so this was a picture a participant took where you see here, and at the bottom is, the caption is literally the conversation that took place in a interview and follow-up focus group, where it's a visual of a group consultation, which shows the challenges of a barrier to accessing care. You know, so from the United States perspective, we may be not thinking of this because of HIPAA and other systematic ways that we approach health. And so it was important to really empower participants to share their stories, their narratives. And so sample methodology just goes through, this was done over a 2-month process where there's recruitment, consent, training, and camera use, pictures, you have to give them time to be able to capture images, discussion, and dissemination. This is just a visual of the characteristics of the participants, so you see you're able to really get a pretty diverse sample based off of your sampling methods. And this is also a sample results of what it looks like by themes. And what's really important is that we don't just identify the barriers, we also empower participants to share solutions. So future plans, just as you see, part of my process is considering what the next grant might be to be able to continue to develop my research career, considering a K or R award that looks at culturally responsive, digital and family community-based intervention that spans the biology, beliefs, behaviors, and barriers, as well as their interactions to health promotion. These are my many references. And I'd like to take a moment to share some acknowledgments to my mentors, Dr. Girardin Jean-Louis and Azizi Seixas, and the Pride team, colleagues, etc. And I'd like to give a big thank you and open the floor for any questions or comments.
Wonderful talk. I do have a question. So you had, the demographic, or not necessarily the demographic, but the educational level of the participants. And I can tell you, this is just anecdotal evidence. I have a very hard time sleeping, and especially around the time of a deadline, right? So whether it's a grant, whether it's a paper that you have to submit, whether it is, I don't know, how do I hire somebody? So it would be interesting to compare those who have highly stressful jobs and their ability to sleep or not sleep, and those who, I saw several who were unemployed. I mean, are their inability to sleep concomitant with that educational level?
Beautiful, beautiful. So the magic here is that the project is still under IRB review, so I do have the capacity to consider including some of that type of inquiry in the Photovoice process, so thank you for that.
I also have another question. So I'm not familiar with Photovoice, I'm a basic scientist, but can you describe for us whether there's special equipment that is needed, whether this equipment is accessible to populations who don't have a lot of means?
Great question. So in the process that I use is a digital camera, and speaking of access, when this project was done in Haiti, none of the women ever used a digital camera. So in part of the consent process was training on how to use a digital camera properly. And once that was taken care of, they also, of course, had contact information for the study personnel if any questions or comments came up. And they were all able to complete the study with really, really powerful images. And I'd like to note that it also went beyond just that scientific part. There was a proper closeout where the participants were presented with the images that they took, and also certificates of appreciation for their participation in the study as well.
Great, thanks. Any other questions? Great.
Thank you.
And identify who you are, please.
Hi, very interesting talk. My name is Francisco Alvarado from the University of Wisconsin. I'm a basic scientist, so this may be a naive question, but I think in your aim too, you mentioned specifically that you wanted to assess how stress, and you highlighted stress from racism. And my question is, how do you quantify that?
Beautiful question, beautiful question. So I'll take it back to that slide. And there, for stress and racism, there is a scale called the Everyday Discrimination Scale. And so that's going to be a proxy of that. So as you mentioned, there are different types of scales to get at this. And so the best that was available in the data set currently is the Everyday Discrimination Scale. And then there's also an interesting open-ended question that asked, have you experienced a stressor in the last year? And so that is really powerful about perception, right? And it's also providing an opportunity for open-ended qualitative analysis, because participants were able to state a few comments about what that stressor may have been. So that will also be able to loop back up. If you see at the top, there are blood assays that are being collected, and so we'll be able to do really powerful biological analyses to connect that as well. thank you for that question.
And I have a basic science question because I'm a basic scientist. So
Okay.
you're going to be measuring epigenetics and epigenetics marks. So my question is, we know that epigenetics are very dynamic, right?
Yeah.
They change with either behavioral interventions or any interventions. So are you measuring these at one point in time, or are you doing this longitudinally? Because it would be interesting to see if some of the interventions actually change the dynamics of the epigenome.
Great question. So this study is related to the parent study that I was mentioned, and that is a observational study in order to inform future behavioral interventions. So at this time, it's not really, situated to be able to follow long term, but depending on the results, that can inform the next steps.
Yeah, that's an R1.
I like that. I like that.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you so very much.
So while Hector sets this up, I'm introducing the next speaker. And our next speaker is Kayla von Asch, or Kyla?